All right, so good morning, everybody. I'm Julie Erickson, a learning specialist with TIE, and with me today is.
I'm Carrie Kennedy. I'm also a learning specialist at TIE.
And we are so excited to talk about kind of webinar, or webinars, that's all we talk about, learning management systems and what's happening in South Dakota and kind of giving a big picture look because we've been, Dr. Mathieson has been getting a lot of calls on, different LMSs and also, like where to even start. So today what we're going to do is we're going to have a quick overview of the various platforms. We're also going to touch on Google Classroom and Microsoft Teams. We are so lucky we have guests with us today that I am so excited. Experts from various schools that have been using these resources. And so they are going to share what has worked in their district and challenges that they've observed. And then there'll also be an opportunity to ask questions. Carrie's shared the resources for today, and she's also shared a Padlet, and so that you guys can go in and drop in questions or comments about the different resources. And also feel free to use the chat. I, so that is kind of where that is. And Renee, you are now a co-host, so you go. So scrolling on down, as we were going to do an introduction of, what is an LMS, just because a lot of times we have, there's a lot of confusion as to what exactly makes up an LMS and or what does that look like. And so as we go, here is the handouts for today, and you guys all have access to them. So very first thing is there's a lot of considerations that when you are selecting an LMS, because there is no perfect LMS, and I think that's the biggest takeaway is there is no perfect LMS. But you're going to want to be thinking about the technology, the implementation, and the support. And so those are things that we will touch on when we introduce the various LMSs, but we'll also, I'm sure, hear about that from the various schools that are using them. As we launch in, we think it's really important that you guys have a good understanding of the definitions. And so I've invited Dave Swank to, share what is an LMS, because he just did this for his district and it's got some really nice graphics. And so Dave, do you want me to drive or do you want to drive?
You can go ahead, Julie, that's fine.
Okay, so then I will share my screen and you can talk away. So we'll let Dave do a quick introduction. So Dave is with Canyon Lake Elementary in Rapid City.
Like Julie mentioned, I'm Dave Swank. I'm at Canyon Lake Elementary School in Rapid City, and like a lot of you, I think the current situation with school closures and COVID-19 has really sort of shaken things up. And one of the obstacles that we've run into as a district of 23 schools is the definitional vagueness that sort of surrounds online learning environments, learning management systems, what they are and what they aren't. So I'm not going to read these definitions to you, but I think it's important to sort of separate what an online learning environment is from an LMS and some of the other components that make up an online learning environment. So an online learning environment can really be anything from an email back and forth between a learner and a facilitator, all the way up to a full-featured LMS that contains everything you need to essentially run a school remotely. A learning management system is probably the most comprehensive tool for facilitating an online learning environment. And that's going to include things like an assessment engine and content delivery and opportunities for instructional interaction between teachers and students, as well as managing all of the data and being able to report out on that. Julie, you can go ahead and advance. And that's different from a content delivery system, which really is more of an online repository for curricular materials. In our case in Rapid City, that really is the online components of the purchased curriculum that we have. So it's where our kids access their reading and math materials when they don't have it in hard copy in front of them. And then the assessment engine is what allows us to collect data in real time to be able to use that to drive instruction. Go ahead, Julie. So also, I think it's important to separate out differences between online learning, distance learning, and blended learning. Again, I'm not going to read these definitions to you, but what we've really been forced to do with school closures is move completely to online learning, which requires a different kind of pedagogy than what we have in face-to-face interactions. You can borrow a lot if you're already moving towards a blended learning situation in your online learning platform, but not identical, and certainly requires different considerations as you're thinking about what teaching and learning looks like in that situation. Go ahead, Julie. Thanks. So in Rapid City, prior to the school closures, we had a very limited online learning environment where we had certain elements that were sort of separate, disparate, and didn't really speak to each other. So we had a place for kids to access materials online. In our case, that was Wonders or Pearson. We had a place to manage our data, which was Skyward. I think most of the state is using Infinite Campus. And then we had a mechanism for communicating with parents. Once the pandemic hit, go ahead and advance, Julie. What happened is we were forced to move to a completely online learning environment really quickly, literally overnight. And as a result of that, we saw a lot of the schools in our system reach for learning management systems that were free or less full functioning. And while we still had some of the same content delivery pieces, each grade level was also sort of searching for different resources that they could use. A lot of those were computer adaptive programs that were offering free licenses. Parent communication was still extremely important, and then you throw Zoom in on top of all of that. What we also saw is that our data management and reporting really existed outside of that learning environment. And in most schools, not all of them, but in most schools, there really wasn't a lot of intentional data collection. There was a lot of assigning of work, minimal instruction, and very little opportunity to collect valuable data. What we were able to do at Canyon Lake was a little bit different because we had already been using a full-featured LMS, which I think I'll be talking about later on in the presentation. But for us, because the learning management system housed all of the other components, it made for a very seamless transition for a lot of our students to be able to move from what they were used to doing at school and being able to manage that online. So with one login, they were able to access all of their content. They were able to use Zoom inside of our learning management system. We were able to collect valuable data while we were in a remote situation, and that allowed our teachers to spend more of their time maintaining the relationships that they had with kids and families. The LMS that we use does have some functionality for doing parent communication, but it's not what we've been using all year. So we continue to sort of use Class Dojo outside of that at that point. But just having that all-in-one system where all of the content, all of the assessment, all of the data lived just made for a much easier transition and allowed us to focus on what we felt was most important as a school.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. This is a nice, I mean, your visuals, you showed this to me last week, I think, before you. Oh, and this is here too. Do you want to touch on that? I'm sorry.
I think what we saw, I mean, yeah, I can go over it quickly. Just what we saw happen when schools closed is that there was a lot of like grabbing whatever was convenient, easy to find, and low cost. And there wasn't a great deal of thought put into how are we going to teach people to use these things? What does the pedagogy need to look like? And all of that really fell onto individual teachers. And so whenever you're making a consideration about, what do we need to use to create the most functional online learning environment, you really have to think about what are the skills and competencies that teachers need to have and how you're going to provide the support to do that. And where does the time and resources come from? Because those are limited. And so how do we find those things in order to get our teachers up to speed as quickly as possible?
Thank you, Dave. That was really, it was good. And this is, it helps, the visual for me really helps. When you showed this to me last week, it was like the visual is so nice to kind of have that big picture. So on the agenda, we talked a little bit about kind of the big picture of things. And so, we mentioned that we would talk about Google and Microsoft Teams. Both of them, when we talk about those, we tend to look at them as learning management systems light, because they don't connect with our student information systems. They don't necessarily, though those of us that are connected with using the state system, you can go back and forth with the emails and things like that. But some of the things that we are seeing with like the Google Classrooms and the Teams is they don't do a lot with the reporting, and they also don't connect with standards or allow that ongoing, tracking that the learning management systems do. On a positive note, both of Google Classroom and Teams provide all of the, they're free. They're something that we have access to. They have a very low threshold to get started. And so we've seen a lot of schools that weren't doing anything with an online platform when COVID hit, to implementing and using Google Classroom. And so Carrie and I talk about Google Classroom as kind of like the starter, or
Yeah.
what do we call it, Carrie?
I can't remember. Now that you say it, I'm
I
not sure.
know.
I can't remember.
It was
It's like
really funny when we said
it
it.
was.
But
Uh,
it's gonna kind of get you hooked, and then you're gonna say, wait, this isn't enough. And so
yeah.
that is one of the things, and that's one of the other reasons we wanted to kind of have you look at the tools and the resources that are available, to make sure that as you're making decisions, you're making informed decisions rather than making a panic decision as you are trying to figure out what to do. All right.
It's the gateway
Yes,
learning
the
management
gateway.
system.
Yes, it's the gateway to getting an LMS. Yes. All right. So the first LMS that we're going to touch on is Empower Learning. And so from the Empower website, they consider themselves a standards reference, competencies-based LMS that you've been searching for. We went through and kind of pulled out the highlights. So when you're looking at Empower, you have the ability to connect to standards. So you need to put your standards in, and the standards need to also have the rubrics with them. And so that's, or the grading. And so that is uh, um, one of the powerful features, because you have a lot of control, but it also is a lot of the upfront work. But with Empower, you can deliver instruction, you can grade, you've got the reporting. You've got a parent portal, which is awesome. It does connect to Infinite Campus. You can use Google and Microsoft really easily within it. You have teacher collaboration. The two things that Empower does not have or do is the ability to share lessons and units across districts. And so in South Dakota, while we have a number of districts that use Empower, you're not able to say, oh, hey, Harrisburg, can you share all of your, playlists with us? Because that is not an option. And that's something that they talk about potentially doing, but because of the different ways the platform is set up for each district, it is challenging. And then content, you do need to put in your own content. And so because there aren't shared playlists, playlists and there isn't embedded content, you need to put that in. And so a couple of the other things within Empower that I've linked on the resources is we've really tried to give you guys an overview of the resource, supplemental materials, and then Empower has a really nice self-assessment that you can go in and check out. So we've invited 2 schools to talk with us today about their use of Empower in their districts. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we'll have Travis Lape from Harrisburg, and we also have Renee James from Beersford with us to talk about Empower. So I don't know who you guys can draw straws over who gets to talk first.
Awesome. Hey, Julie.
Hi.
So I am managing 2 worlds here. I am on 2 different Zoom calls. I've got my earpiece, so if I hear them say Travis, then I need to just quickly switch over. So I apologize. We in Harrisburg have used Empower. We used a platform called Buzz when we first went down this road of personalized learning, doing away with some grade levels in our elementary school. But the platform just wasn't built out enough for us to really feel confident with. And so we went with Empower 5 years ago and really built out our standard base. So when Julie talks about its standard reference and all of that, it is truly that. And so Empower can be very overwhelming for staff, for kids, for parents, if you haven't done the work of standard-based grading yet, because it drives that mindset. And so for us, it's been a great tool because our elementary has been standard-based grading for over 10 years. So that idea and reference was easy. It was really just now thinking more through how do we build content? What does that look like? And so that was kind of our journey to it. And then Beersford joined us on the journey as well, and kind of in a different environment is using it. So I'll just kind of let Renee kind of talk about her experience, and then I can show some things if they would like, and then we can answer some questions too.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thanks, Travis.
Thanks, Travis. Okay. When we started, we jumped full force into Empower, and I think Travis just wrapped it up. And I like to say that Empower is created for your district, and you can make it your own. You are not working within a template of an LMS, which has its pros and its cons. And I think I was talking to a couple of teachers, and I think one thing that we have really come to appreciate and to learn, so pro and con, if you are not customizing, if you are not on the journey of customization, I would not recommend Empower. And that is one of our obstacles, one of our hurdles in Beersford, where our elementary has gone full force into customizing, and Empower works wonderful for our elementary. In the middle school, high school, we have more of a mix, and I'll be honest, for some, it has been a nightmare because they're not customizing. And we have found that Google Classroom has worked better for teachers because if you're not trying to customize, it's not a great tool. Now, with that said, if you are on the road to customizing and you have done standard-based grading, which, like Travis said, we've been doing as a district for about the last 10 years. So we had done that groundwork, and I would highly recommend there. But the training, you can't just jump. I would not recommend on March 13th going, oh, we're going to use Empower. And so having that. The other thing that we really liked about Empower was that all the learning opportunities can be done within Empower. So they have the word processing application. You can make videos, the photos, it talks well with Google. But if you want to, you can do everything inside of Empower. The other thing we like is the transparency of it. And like I said, I don't have any other experience outside of Empower, so other LMSs may do this, but parents, teachers, students on their individual accounts can see everything. So every assignment that they've turned in, the redos, the feedback, it really allows for transparency of what the student, what the learner is doing, what the teacher is doing. We learned kind of the hard way that the teacher was giving feedback and not fully explaining, and the learner was understanding, but the parents weren't. So we had to be very mindful of remembering that parents were seeing everything. Support, remember, it is customized to your school. I would say support is good. It is not always fast. Not because they're not working, but because of the difficulty of it's just for you. They're making a website and creating things just for you. But I would say overall support has been good.
Thanks, Renee. I mean, that's, and one of the things, and I've worked closely with both Travis and Renee, and Renee, you guys kicked off your Empower instance in what month?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that.
August. You got it in August.
And yes, we got it in August, and there was no standards in Empower, and Empower hadn't really worked with the South Dakota school yet. We like to say that we were building the plane while it was in flight. And we tell a lot of districts, don't take off too early. Build the plane. It's better to wait a year, 2 years. If you're going to go into Empower and really customize, build it first. Because we were just trying to stay ahead of our fastest kid.
That first year, but the second year was oh so much better.
The second year was oh so much better. Yes. And we had the foundation, and it's funny, if you talk to any of the teachers, their first playlist, they would be embarrassed to show you. But by the end of the year, the playlist really developed. So you're still tweaking it every year. You're still, some people, one of the myths of customization is that, it's on there and it never changes, and the kids sit on the iPad all day. And I would say that teachers, facilitators are tweaking playlist more than they would have in traditional curriculum.
And I think, just to piggyback a little bit, Renee, I think the thing with Empower is that, and this is really with any learning management system, but definitely with Empower, is that Empower was really built in this idea of customization, personalization, so front loading content. So the heavy lifting here is the front loading of content. Once the content is there, then you get to be the creative educator in the classroom of how now do I support learners? How do I tweak what I just uploaded? For some learners it works, for some it doesn't. Now here's my flexibility, where I think other learning management systems, you could live week to week and be okay putting things in as a house. In Empower, if you're trying to do that week to week, that's where it gets very cumbersome, and it's too much. And so we've had really good success of our teachers being able to build playlists or being able to structure that. On like our math side, we use a pre-assessment. So we use their quiz feature. Kids take a pre-assessment. We align every question to one of the standards in our standards grid. It reports it out to us and lets us know, hey, this kid is low in this standard. We know then what topic or what measurement topic they're ready for. So we send them to that playlist, and they get learning material, practice material, and then they get to show their mastery. And so it gives you that flexibility to move kids based on where they're at, rather than just this set house that I think some box learning management systems, they provide that. Like, here's your shell, here's what it looks like. And it works if that's where your staff is at. Like you said, you have to go where your staff is. If you can get your staff to this environment, it does allow some flexibility.
So, thank you guys. Make sure if you have questions or comments or experiences with these LMSs in your own district, please drop them in the Padlet. Martin, thanks for noting some comments about Teams in there. I appreciate it. So that's, thank you so much, Renee and Travis. I appreciate you guys coming in and sharing with us. All right, so on the, and Empower has done some really fun things with putting together like how to set up your classroom and how to teach in a virtual environment. And so those videos and resources have been linked also on the slides so that you guys can actually go back and check them out. All right, Schoology. So when Carrie and I were putting this together, we really like that Schoology has a pronunciation on their website on what Schoology is. And so Schoology is another one of the platforms that a lot of the districts in South Dakota are using. And one of the things that we've really found with Schoology is it's got a lot of customization ability, but it also has a lot of collaborative ability. And so one of the things that you can do with Schoology is you can share lessons and units across districts. And so that is something that we don't have with Empower, because like Renee really described it so well, as it's built specifically for your district. Schoology, you have more ability to share across and find content. In terms of Schoology, there is the free version, and a lot of schools will start out with teachers using the free version. Where you run into challenges with the free version is you don't have the infinite campus connection, and you also don't end up with the reporting capabilities. Neither Schoology, free or paid, comes with content per se. But so that's kind of the big picture. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we'll invite Jason from Gayville to pop in and share his experiences with Schoology. And you guys have been using it forever, haven't you, Jason?
Yeah, we've been using it for 5 years. I guess since we started this whole thing. I just shared my wrong screen, so let me get the right screen up here, and then maybe I can figure this out. Or maybe not. Well, now I'm going to clear my screen, and I'll just go off my notes.
Okay.
Okay, so I outlined some of the benefits that I thought that it provided to the Gayville-Volland School District. And I too can show you some screenshots here at the end if anybody has questions. But one of the things that we liked when we looked at this 5 years ago is the number of options that it had for us, because we were a customized school, or we were developing customized learning. And so I will go through some of the different aspects of it that make it really easy for us. The first one is it's integrated with the K-12 data center. So it's single sign-on. For those of you that aren't as techy, what we have is once you have a K-12 user account, now your DDN campus, your Schoology, your webmail, everything has the same username and password. So that integration has been wonderful for us. The other parts, and I know Empower focused on this, but we really like the communication tools that it has. You can communicate district-wide, school-wide, class-wise, group-wise, and on an individual basis. So we think that that works really well. Most districts in South Dakota use some type of communication system, whether it be a calling system or a push app that goes out to an Android or iOS device. This allows each individual user from within Schoology to make those communications on their own. They wouldn't necessarily have to have access to that district-wide notification. Where this comes in really handy is you can simply make a group for boys basketball, and that allows the coach to communicate with all those users, and it's on a personal basis. And if they just want to communicate with one user, they can do the same thing. It all comes up on an Android or an iOS device, just like a notification would on your cell phone. So that's been really nice, I think, from the district standpoint. We too are standards-based grading. We are a customized / personalized school, but I think for those schools that are not, Schoology has both a standards-based grading feature and it has a traditional grade book. So for schools that are not personalized or customized, I don't think you have to be turned off to this LMS because it can function like a traditional grade book. It also, once you attach standards to each one of the assessments or assignments, it's going to track each individual student's ability to meet that standard and to what percentage level. Again, that's all customized. It's on the back end, so you can set your proficiency levels really easily and change those at any point in time you want. That's really nice if you've got teachers that are getting together to discuss how well students are grasping a standard. They can quickly print off a report, and it's going to give them a class report on what percentage of attainment on each individual standard students have. I touched on this, but I don't know how you differentiate or customize if you don't have an LMS. We only know Schoology, so it's very, very, very easy to customize and or differentiate with Schoology. Once you've created an assessment or assignment, say you have IEP kids, you can change the number of options they have for answers. Students that need things read to them, it's easy to attach the question in audio format. It could be in video. They've got 20-some different ways to answer questions. One of them is audio. So students that struggle comprehending maybe the way you wrote the question, you can give them options of submitting their assignments with audio files or video files. And it's built right into the platform. So it's not like you have to go outside, create the audio or video file, and then import it. It's right there and it's pretty easy. The archiving and collaboration of files of classes, I think, is really easy. We've been used to things where there's a rollover date. So if May 22 is the rollover date, everybody loses access. It's like DD in Campus. When you decide that it's time for a new school year, everybody loses access to their previous year. Schoology is nice in that it automatically just archives the class, so you can go back previous years and your class is still there. Grades are still there. Student assignments are still there. You don't lose anything. For customized and personalized schools, this is important because our due dates fluctuate. So students who did not end the school year on May 22nd, like a traditional student, they can still work in the LMS, and it doesn't bother the teacher. The teacher still can be looking towards next year, and the course is still archived and it still has all of the information in it. Julie hit on this, but collaboration is really easy in Schoology. Not only can you collaborate with individual teachers inside the school, but you can share with other Schoology users. So if, I know Beersford is not, but my example is if Beersford would use Schoology, all of their teachers can have access to the same tests, assessments, documents that we have. And there is a repository that all Schoology users can look through, and if somebody's put it out, that you can actually borrow and use. Those were the highlights of what I thought were good about Schoology. We were sold on Schoology because at the time it looked a lot like a Facebook front end. So we thought that kids really would be drawn to that. There hasn't really been any functions or features in Schoology that we would have liked to be using that are not there. But I do think one of the drawbacks, and I'm hearing this from my lower elementary, who really want us to go out and look at different LMSs again, is it doesn't have a kiddie feel at all to it. So our K-1-2 teachers think like Kickstand or something like that would be a better LMS. I like the fact that once you're in the district, it is one LMS, and parents that have kids at the lower elementary or the upper don't have to have two different apps or two different platforms that they're worried about. Also, Julie touched on how it integrates with our SIS, which is Infinite Campus. There is plugins that make data transfer seamless. And if you don't like that use, which we don't always use that feature, you also can grab information just with a CSV file, and you can import and export really easily back and forth between the two platforms, and it works really well. So we haven't had any struggles with it working with Infinite Campus. It works great with Google Classroom. If you have Google Drive documents, if you are a Renaissance Learning School, all those LTI, those interoperational things, they all are compatible with Schoology. So we really haven't found something that we want to do with it that it won't do. But it definitely is not geared towards the very lowest of elementary, but you can make it work. You can turn some of the features off so that it's not so populated. Again, we like it a lot. We looked at other ones out there. I'm not saying it's the best one, but it's the one that checked the most boxes for us. So Julie, I don't know if you have any specific questions for me or anybody else has questions, but I will stand by and answer them.
Awesome. So far, nobody has asked a specific question, but I'm sure there will be something before we're all done. Renee does agree that you trying to customize without an LMS is horrible. So I'm glad you brought that up. Okay. So Carrie, do you want to share your screen? You're muted.
Will you just share yours, because I'm going to have you turn it off and Becca's going to share hers.
Oh, yeah, sure, of course.
Thanks.
So let me share my screen again. And do make sure you're, dropping questions and stuff in the Padlet. And so we're seeing stuff in the chat too, so that's good.
Absolutely.
All right, so there you go, Carrie.
Thanks, Julie. So the next LMS we're going to talk about is Canvas, and Canvas has both a free version and a paid for version. So earlier when Julie was talking, we talked about the gateway LMS and Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams being that gateway. Back when I was a classroom teacher, I used Google Classroom and trained other teachers in Google Classroom, but after about a semester, I wanted more. I wanted to be able to use it more in a different fashion. So I started using the free version of Canvas. And then when I came to South Dakota from North Carolina, when I went to go work at East, I also used the free version of Canvas because at that point they weren't paying for Canvas yet. So there are some very similar functionalities that Schoology also has. You can deliver instructions, connect to standards. Becca's going to talk a little bit more about that. It will do grading, whether it's standards-based or traditional. The paid-for version will hook up to your data management system. Canvas does not have a parent portal. So that is one thing that Schoology did have that Canvas does not. It will hook up to Infinite Campus. It does hook up to Skyward because Rapid City uses Skyward and they have no problems with that. Your Google Microsoft integration is pretty seamless, and they do have a repository where you can share lessons and units across districts. You can share them across the nation if you want to. It's called the Commons, and so it very much, you can share them with other teachers, and you can also collaborate with other teachers. Becca and her co-teacher, they collaborate on their class together. So it does offer all of those versions, whether it's free or paid. The paid for version has some bells and whistles, especially that reporting part. On here, there's a little video that you can watch. It's just an intro to Canvas. And then there is this community guide, and the community guide, it has a huge Q&A section, how to get started, lots of different trainings that you can go through. So I would like to introduce you to Rebecca Myers-Kapaleski, and she is a teacher at East Middle School, which is a customized learning school. And this will be her second year using Canvas coming up. Go for it, Becca. Sure.
I teach 8th grade math and Algebra 1 out at East, and I'm going to go ahead and share what the user interface kind of looks like here. And so students can have all of their classes placed within their dashboard. And so I'm going to show you my newest class that I am working on building. And so they give you sandboxes that you can build, and Canvas also suggests using a template for their teachers. And so what you do is you give them a suggestion of the template that you want, some buttons that you would want students to have, and then we at East decided on those and created our own template. So we tried to make it as student friendly as possible. And these are buttons that will take them directly to their coursework. And so if I click here, that links me to my modules. And the one fabulous thing that I love with going customized more so this year and paperless on Canvas is that I can add prerequisites to everything. And so I haven't built everything here just yet, but if I go ahead and click on this and hit edit, I can add prerequisites. And then for each page, like the Get to Know Teachers page that Ms. Ward and I are working on, they're going to go in and learn how to mark something as done. Our first unit is just getting them used to using the interface how we have it set up. You can have it to where they can't go on to something until they actually submit an assignment. We want to do discussions, and so they can't continue on in their learning until they contribute to the page. And then our basic classroom rules is going ahead, and it's through a Google Doc that I've uploaded, and they just have to score at least 10 out of 10, which if they do the assignment, they'll score the 10 out of 10. And then we at East have to do a handbook quiz for each of our classes. So we threw that in our first introduction unit to get them used to the quiz modules. The thing I'm most excited about using this year is outcomes. This aligns our state standards. I can add an outcome for geometry, and even though I am a traditional grade book, it will help me. I can pinpoint each assignment to geometry or algebra or each of those different types of standards, and it will help me to see data as I go through and collect to see which students are closer to mastery. Another thing that Canvas has, and we didn't train our kiddos on it before the pandemic, was the collaborations. I can go ahead and if I add one, they can talk with each other. What else? They can talk, they can discuss, they can edit documents together, I can group them. Conferences, it's like a Zoom call, but all within Canvas. I can make groups there as well. It integrates really seamlessly with Google. Let me see if I can bring up one of those from my modules to show you guys really quickly. So my basic classroom rules and procedures, they never have to leave Canvas with this interface. And so all they have to do is click into this document. They do have to allow Google to be accepted on their end, since they have to have a Google account as well. But they can click in here and fill in the table for classroom rules, and our code of cooperation is what we call it at East. So we have that set up for this year. And then we're gonna build a big poster to put in our classroom. And so once they hit submit, they can go on to their next assignment. We can add rubrics that are really easy to grade in their speed grader. I'm gonna go paperless this year. And yeah. Is there anything else that I am not covering, you guys? I wanna do this quick so that you have time for questions and answers at the end.
I think, Becca, my only question is challenges. Have you know, what are some of the challenges with Canvas?
Well, with the pandemic, some teachers were using it quite often, and other teachers did not have anything set up. And so our biggest challenge was kids did not know how to get their work from there. And then the parent piece, there wasn't a way for parents to really see it yet. And now we know about the app, so we're going to set them up as observers in our classes. They do have webinars daily on each topic, and that's in the help off to the side. I believe they do that even for the free version.
Okay. And that's good to know. You know, and Travis did share too about the app, so that's exciting because
Yeah.
parent communication in that parent portal. I can remember, like Jason, Schoology does a really nice job of communicating with parents. You know, I mean, you can go in and really see where your kids are at and everything. And that's one of the really nice things is being able to, and empowered us too, being able to go in and see what they've done and how that looks. So, all right. So I'm going to quick share my screen, and we're going to go on to our last paid LMS, and that is Kickstand. So Kickstand is one that I really wasn't super familiar with until I started working more with Canyon Lake Elementary in Rapid City, and they are really a full service, because not only do they come with the standards and everything, they also come with the content. And so they're a little bit different than some of the other LMSs that we've talked about. And Dave has done a lot of customizing of Kickstand, or working with Kickstand, and they've done a lot of changes since Dave has started using it. And so it's actually there's some really amazing things that you can do. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave and let him talk a little bit about Kickstand and how they're using it and the platform.
Thanks, Julie. So we moved to Kickstand as our LMS in the fall of 2018, after we had started out with a different LMS and ran into some issues and some missed deadlines with them. And so I actually interviewed 24 different companies and did a dozen demos. And Kickstand really rose to the top for us. And they've been a fantastic partner as we've moved into more of a personalized and blended learning environment. But I should also share that we do personalized and blended learning in 2nd through 5th grade, but our K-1 is still a more traditional environment, and that's partially a function of our campus. But what was really appealing about Kickstand, especially given when we started, which was not completely unlike the situation that we're in now, where we had to sort of shift pedagogy overnight, in that it's a turnkey option. And so I met with Tom, who's the CEO of Kickstand, and said, how quickly can we get started? And he was like, how quickly do you need it? And within, I think, 2 or 3 days, we were up and running. The content that comes with Kickstand is there's no additional cost for it. And it comes already organized and standards aligned, but it's still completely customizable. And so we needed something that we could hand to teachers on day one and say, this will get you through while we're building out bigger and better things. And so that was really helpful to be able to start with something that had usable content from day one, usable assessments that were standards aligned from day one. It's also really easy to build your own content, though. And just to give you an example, when our school closed, our specials teachers were like, how do we deliver content to kids? I spent 30 minutes with them, explaining them how to upload and add content. And within 3 days, they had built out a month's worth of content for PE, music, STEAM, and our counselor also built a course. So it was really easy for them to be able to use. It's almost impossible to screw it up, which is really nice. It's also really easy for kids to use. So we were using Kickstand with our 2nd through 5th graders all year long this year. So when school closed, it was not an issue to have them continue to use that. But our K1 teachers were like, what can we do? And so again, I called Kickstand and said, how quickly can you get me K1 content? And within 2 hours, we had reading and math courses built for us essentially, and all of our K1 students uploaded. They had no experience with it previously, and on day 1, we sent a message to families and said, this is now available for you. And within the first week, 85% of our kindergartners and 1st graders had logged in and put in significant amount of time navigating the system because it is a very user-friendly interface, both for K1 and for older kids. They have 2 different interfaces that you can choose to use. And you can toggle back and forth between those if you want to as well. So they have sort of a elementary friendly version and a secondary friendly version. The other thing that works really well for us is the reports that we're able to get. So we're able to measure both growth and mastery, as well as get a detailed usage report. So not only will we know that they spent time in a course, we'll know that they spent time taking an assessment in a course or reviewing videos in a course, those kinds of things. I think probably the most valuable thing that we've gotten from them, though, is their customer service. They've been incredibly responsive. We have basically 2 points of contact. We have Lindsay, who we talk to every time we're on a call with them. And then we have Jeff, who is our personal programmer. And they do a lot of whiteboarding with us. And so if we say we want this functionality, they generally are able to build it for us pretty quickly. Lindsay's response time to us has been measured in minutes rather than hours or days, which has really been pretty incredible. Our teachers, by and large, have said they wouldn't want to go back to anything else. And because they've been so responsive in building the system that we want, it really hasn't had a lot of drawbacks. Again, we use it in both a traditional environment for K1 and for our personalized and blended learning 2nd through 5th grade. They also have content available all the way through 12th grade. So it would be an option for somebody who needed to move quickly into something else. And because the user interface is so friendly, it doesn't take a lot of training to use. Now, that said, there are a lot of nuances within Kickstand that you're going to want to spend time learning if you're using it. But just from a it's very beginner friendly LMS. I would say probably our biggest challenge is the cost. It is one of the more expensive options, at least of the ones that we're looking at today. But there are no hidden fees with it. So every single feature, every piece of content, all come included with it. As a Title I school, we're able to absorb the cost of Kickstand really easily into our budget. If you didn't have that as a resource, it might be a little bit more challenging.
So Dave, there's a quick question about, is there a parent communication component?
So there's a parent version of it that we haven't used a whole lot, as we were this was our first year of full personalized learning. And so there were some things that we just hadn't figured out how it was going to look to parents. So we hadn't used it yet, but there is parent access. There's not really a parent communication tool outside of email back and forth within the system. But there's transparency for parents within Kickstand.
Okay, that's good. So yeah, we had a question on that, and then so that pretty much I think that's everything. So this pretty much wraps up all of the different platforms that we were going to look at. Next we'd like to kind of go in and look at the, if there are any questions. Jeff, you asked about the price, and I just did get an email from them, so I can pull up the price real quick, hopefully.
Renee talked about in the chat with Empower, they have a parent night to train the parent because it's not always the easiest to use. So they bring in the parents to do a training. I can say with East, with Canvas, the parents, especially when they went to digital learning, that the parents reacted very well, and the teachers who were using Canvas, the parents were extremely happy with the interface.
Carrie, one thing in Beresford that we learned, that we've had some feedback since we've gone remote learning, is that they were forced to learn Empower with their students and go through it. And now we're hearing, oh, I love this.
Yes.
Especially parents that don't come to the training. But it is definitely, I mean, like, when I'm hearing about Kickstand, I'm like, ooh, that is not how Empower works. So,
right.
But there's a lot to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Julie just put the Kickstand pricing in the chat. It's $89 per student, and there's a tie discount of 33%. So it's $59 per student with a tie discount, minimum of $5,000. Whitney asked, a lot of these LMSs are able to share content across district. How does that work if you're using teachers pay teachers resources? That's a really good question. So if you are using a teacher pay teacher resource, you have only bought the right to that one license for that one person. So you would not want to put that in like the commons or in the shared resources, because then you're breaking that copyright law. So you would not be sharing that with other teachers or through the commons.
All right. So now is really your time to, ask questions. We have all these experts here to be able to. They've used these resources heavily and for a long time, and so they're a really great resource. So if you want to unmute and ask a question, or if you want to chat a question, please do, because this is definitely an opportunity to talk to the experts and hear what it's really like. You guys are so quiet.
A lot of information.
All right. Well, so with that, do you have something to say, Martin? Oh, okay. You were all poised. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording.